You know, when you plan a controlled demolition, you expect the building to fall straight down. You expect the dust to settle inside the perimeter, and you expect to just walk away with a clean slate.
Right, which is the dream scenario for any tactician.
Exactly. What you do not expect is for that demolition to trigger a massive, completely uncontained earthquake that, like, instantly chokes off 20% of the world's oil supply.
Yeah, that's a rude awakening.
Seriously. But nearly 2 weeks into the U.S.-Israeli military campaign in Iran, that is exactly what we are seeing unfold. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking you into the mechanics of a military operation that has violently collided with the realities of our deeply interconnected global system.
It really is the ultimate collision between, tactical planning on a whiteboard and the messy, unpredictable reality of geopolitics.
100%. And by the way, I have to say, I love the dimly lit global situation room backdrop you've got going on today. The holographic maps of the Middle East, the scrolling market tickers. It really sets the stage for you listening.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I figured we needed the right aesthetic for a situation this intense.
It's perfect. So our source material today comes from a recent Patreon post by KULT. And what this post does is summarize a massive bombshell investigation that was just published by the New York Times on Tuesday, March 10th, 2026.
And the reporting is just, it's staggering. It paints a picture of two entirely different wars.
Right. The war they meticulously planned in theory, and the war that is actually being fought right now on the ground and in the financial markets.
Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to untangle that widening gap. We're looking at the stark contrast between the U.S. administration's pre-war expectations and the blistering battlefield and economic realities dominating the globe today.
But real quick, before we jump in, we want to make it absolutely clear to you that because these sources cover a politically charged ongoing military conflict involving the Trump administration, we are not taking any sides.
Yes, very important. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, policies, or political figures mentioned. Our goal is strictly to impartially report and unpack the ideas and facts contained in the original source material, helping you understand the situation as it has been reported.
We are solely here to analyze the blueprints and the outcomes as presented by the sources, leaving all the politics at the door.
Absolutely. So let's set the stage. The initial premise of this conflict was this massive, sweeping operation aimed at fundamentally dismantling the Iranian regime.
Right.
And the opening move happened a couple of weeks ago on February 28 with a highly targeted decapitation strike, the assassination of the 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
And the operating theory there was that removing the man at the very top would fracture the regime, alter the entire trajectory of the nation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the underlying assumption heading into this strike was that killing an 86-year-old figurehead would essentially serve as a geopolitical reset button.
Right.
The expectation outlined in the reporting was that by removing him, a new slate of more pragmatic successors would step into the vacuum. Planners assumed these hypothetical moderates would, look at the overwhelming military force raining down on them and conclude that survival meant coming to the negotiating table.
What's fascinating here is how fundamentally that assumption misunderstands the internal mechanics of an autocratic regime under fire.
How so?
Well, there is this persistent, almost idealistic bias in Western military planning that assumes a decapitation strike will embolden moderate reformers.
Like they've just been waiting in the wings for their moment.
Exactly. But political science and historical precedent show us that when an authoritarian power structure feels an existential threat, it does not democratize, it calcifies.
Right, because their immediate overriding instinct is just survival.
Yes. Moderates rely on diplomacy, bureaucracy, public sentiment, things that are completely useless when bombs are falling.
Yeah, you can't really legislate away an airstrike.
No, you can't. Hardliners control the military apparatus, the intelligence services, and the guns. So the moment the supreme leader was killed, the pragmatists were instantly sidelined by the people who hold the actual monopoly on violence.
And according to the sources, the person who stepped into that role wasn't a reformer at all. The 86-year-old Ayatollah was immediately replaced by his 56-year-old son, Mujtaba Khamenei.
Who is a figure deeply, deeply embedded in the regime's most aggressive factions.
Yeah, he's described in the reporting as a severe hardliner with incredibly deep historical ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
So the power dynamics inside Iran didn't dilute or fracture like the U.S. hoped. They immediately concentrated into this much denser, highly militarized core.
There's actually a quote in the source material from Alex Vatanka, he's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, that aggressively underlines this miscalculation.
What did he say?
He states, "It's a huge humiliation for the United States to conduct an operation of this magnitude, risk so much, and end up killing an 86-year-old man, only to have him replaced by his hardline son."
Wow. Yeah, that puts it pretty bluntly.
It really does. It sounds like they plan to knock down a crumbling 86-year-old retaining wall, only to find a reinforced steel bunker built right behind it.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You execute this historic operation to clear the path, and you instantly realize you are now facing an even harder, more entrenched obstacle than the one you just removed.
And to take your bunker analogy a step further, the real problem is that the bunker was actually the thing holding the regime's military apparatus together all along.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, by removing the older, perhaps slightly more cautious figurehead, the strike effectively handed total unchecked control to the IRGC.
Yeah.
The moderates who might have advocated for de-escalation were neutralized overnight.
So the people now in charge are the ones who view any form of negotiation as outright treason.
Exactly.
Which means that reinforced steel bunker isn't just sitting there absorbing impacts, it is actively firing back. The sources note that this newly consolidated leadership defied U.S. tactical expectations almost the second they took power.
Right, the velocity of their response changed the entire complexion of the conflict within hours.
And we aren't just reading between the lines on this. The reporting notes that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth publicly acknowledged on Tuesday that Iran's fierce retaliation against its neighbors took the Pentagon by surprise.
Which is an incredible admission on the record.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Now, he did attempt to spin it publicly, insisting that the aggressive response merely reflected, quote, the regime's desperation. But the core admission of surprise remains right there.
And that element of surprise has carried an astronomical price tag.
No kidding.
The sources reference closed Capitol Hill briefings revealing that the Pentagon burned through $5.6 billion on munitions in just the first 2 weeks of the war.
Wait, how does a military apparatus that plans a multi-billion-dollar decapitation strike get caught off guard by a retaliation? Wouldn't a violent response from their neighbors be Plan A?
You think so, right?
I mean, you are executing a regime-ending operation against a major regional power. The idea that planners wouldn't expect a fierce, immediate lashing out across the region seems totally baffling to anyone looking at this from the outside.
This raises an important question about the blind spots inherent in technologically superior militaries.
What do you mean?
When a superpower plans a massive operation, they often fall into the trap of projecting their own symmetrical logic onto the enemy. The Pentagon models scenarios based on traditional warfare, right? Intercepting fighter jets, degrading radar installations, taking out surface-to-air missile batteries.
Symmetrical, conventional war.
Exactly. But they are fighting an adversary that knows it cannot win a conventional symmetrical war. Iran didn't just line up its tanks in the desert to be pulverized by U.S. air superiority. They leaned entirely into asymmetric warfare.
Meaning they don't attack where you are strong, they attack where you are fundamentally vulnerable.
Precisely. A desperate regime doesn't play by the rules of conventional engagement. It weaponizes chaos. It lashes out wildly at your blind spots and soft targets in the surrounding region because it is fighting for its very existence.
So the planners expected a chess match where they took the opponent's king.
And the opponent responded by flipping the board and setting the room on fire.
Wow. And the human cost of that fire is absolutely devastating. The reporting states that Iran's UN ambassador reported at least 1,332 Iranian civilians killed as of March 6.
And that was just the official number provided by their side at that specific date.
Right. The sources indicate that broader estimates from human rights organizations put the total number of both military and civilian deaths much, much higher.
It is a profound, sprawling tragedy. And that unchecked chaos is exactly what transitions us into what the sources identify as Iran's single most effective weapon in this conflict.
Which isn't their missile stockpile or their ground troops.
No, not at all. It is their systemic ability to completely cripple the global economy.
Because if you're fighting an asymmetric war, you look for the lever that causes your opponent the most systemic pain. And for Iran, that lever is geographically right on their doorstep, the Strait of Hormuz.
It's the ultimate geopolitical choke point.
The reporting details how Iranian retaliatory drone attacks on commercial shipping have brought tanker traffic through that strait to an almost complete standstill.
To grasp the gravity of this, we really have to look at the mechanics of the global energy market. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping lane. It is the central artery of the industrialized world.
Yeah, the sources highlight that roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil flows through this specific choke point.
20%. When you constrict that flow, the domino effect doesn't take weeks to materialize. It happens in real time.
The sources map out exactly what those dominoes look like as they fall, too. Iraq has been forced to slash its oil production by an incredible 60%.
60%, that's massive.
And not because their wells ran dry, but because the oil literally has nowhere to go. They can't load it onto ships. The UAE and Kuwait are rapidly reducing their output for the exact same reason. Their massive inland storage facilities are completely full.
Right. Analysts at RBC Capital Markets are quoted in the source material calling this the most significant energy crisis since the oil embargo of the 1970s.
And what makes this so mechanically fascinating and terrifying is that Iran didn't even need to sink a massive fleet of supertankers to achieve this.
No, they didn't. The global shipping industry is governed by maritime insurance, specifically entities like Lloyd's of London.
Okay.
So when a few cheap Iranian drones strike commercial vessels, maritime insurance premiums instantly skyrocket by hundreds of %, or the coverage is just pulled entirely.
And without insurance, shipping companies legally and financially cannot move their boats through the strait.
Exactly. The physical ships are fine, but the economic mechanism that allows them to move is frozen.
So the oil just backs up into the pipe.
It does. And the global oil supply chain operates on a highly delicate, just-in-time delivery model. The oil being pumped today is supposed to be on a ship tomorrow, arriving at a refinery next week.
So there's no slack in the system.
None. When the ships stop, the storage tanks in places like Kuwait and the UAE fill up in a matter of days. Once storage hits 100% capacity, you have to physically cap the oil wells to stop the flow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, capping and uncapping a well is a very complex, time-consuming engineering process. So even if the strait miraculously opened tomorrow, the supply shock is already baked into the system for months.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the New York Times investigation summarized here reveals the pre-war calculus of the administration regarding this exact threat.
This part is wild.
President Trump apparently did acknowledge the risk of rising oil prices before the attacks, but he dismissed it as a short-term concern that shouldn't overshadow the primary mission of dismantling the regime.
Right. He reportedly instructed Energy Secretary Chris Wright and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to prepare options for managing a price surge.
But then he stayed publicly silent on those options until more than 48 hours after the war had already begun. Dismissing the Strait of Hormuz as a short-term concern is like buying a travel-sized fire extinguisher while actively lighting a match inside a fireworks factory.
That's spot on.
You are dealing with an incredibly volatile, hyper-connected system. You can't just hit pause on 20% of the global oil supply and expect the markets to hold their breath until the military operation wraps up.
To use your fireworks factory analogy, the administration's planners were looking purely at the physical missiles as the fireworks. They completely missed that the global shipping insurance market and the just-in-time delivery systems were actually the powder keg.
Right.
They treated the economy as something separate from the battlefield, when in modern warfare, the economy is the battlefield. Economic warfare functions as the ultimate force multiplier for a technologically outmatched military like Iran's.
And that economic paralysis occurring in the Middle East draws a straight, devastating line directly back to American soil.
It absolutely does.
An overseas energy crisis instantly mutates into a massive domestic political emergency. The blowback is immediately visible to everyday citizens. Gasoline prices have spiked 17% since this price war began.
And that 17% surge at the pump is triggering a 5-alarm fire within the administration.
Oh, yeah. Because the political clock is ruthless. The sources cite internal reporting from El País noting that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has been explicitly warning in internal meetings about a catastrophic effect these rising fuel prices will have on Republicans in the upcoming November midterm elections.
And this panic isn't contained behind closed doors anymore. It's spilling out onto national television.
Yeah, Senator Rand Paul went on Fox Business and issued a very stark warning. He said that if military operations continue to push oil above $100 a barrel, quote, I think this could lead to a catastrophic election.
So you are watching a massive dichotomy play out in real time. Publicly, President Trump is repeatedly proclaiming the operation a sweeping success.
Right.
But internally, the administration's officials are increasingly pessimistic. They are staring at a structural trap with no clear exit strategy, though the sources state they haven't fully communicated the depth of those concerns directly to the president yet.
They are desperately scrambling to build an off-ramp. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Hegseth have started outlining significantly more limited tactical objectives.
Right, they're shifting the goalposts.
Exactly, to things like destroying Iran's missile capabilities, dismantling weapons factories, and disabling its navy. They are trying to frame these isolated, achievable metrics as a definition of victory so they can justify pulling back.
But the public messaging remains incredibly tangled and contradictory. The sources point out that Trump has sent wildly mixed signals.
Like what?
Well, at one point he suggested the war could stretch on for more than a month, while in the very same breath calling the operation very comprehensive practically.
I have to challenge that framing because from a purely logistical standpoint, how can those two concepts coexist?
They really can't.
Right. A comprehensive dismantling of the Iranian regime means locating and destroying thousands of deeply buried, reinforced underground facilities spread across a massive country. That takes months, if not years, of sustained bombing.
Exactly.
A short, one-month timeline means dropping a few tactical bombs and declaring victory. You fundamentally cannot have a war that is both brief and comprehensively regime-ending.
You've hit on the exact cognitive dissonance driving the administration's internal panic. Matthew Pottinger, a former deputy national security advisor now at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, is quoted in the sources offering a blunt assessment of the president's mindset.
What did he say?
He says he doesn't want to get involved in a sequel war. He wants the comprehensive victory without the comprehensive time commitment.
So what does this all mean? If the military is spending billions of dollars to hit tactical targets, but the political clock is rapidly running out because 17% gas price spikes are driving voters away, who actually controls the timeline of this war?
It's the ultimate question.
Is it the generals in the Pentagon? Or is it the global oil markets and the November ballot box?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see the inescapable trap that the administration has built for itself. There is a fundamental incompatibility between the mechanics of military victory and the mechanics of a democratic political cycle.
Because they operate on totally different timelines.
Exactly. Military objectives, especially against an entrenched asymmetric adversary defending its home turf, require immense patience. You need time to systematically degrade their capabilities.
Right.
But democratic political cycles and hyper-connected global markets possess zero patience. They demand instant stability. When a foreign conflict spikes gas prices by 17% just months before an election, the military timeline is instantly subordinated to the political timeline.
Wow.
You can have absolute tactical superiority in the air, but if the economic blowback threatens to cost you the Senate or the House at home, your grand strategy is inherently compromised by your own voters.
It really is a fascinating, incredibly complex web that we've untangled for you today. Let's recap exactly where this leaves us.
Sounds good.
We started with an operation that was confidently predicted to be a swift, decisive victory that would bring pragmatic Iranian leaders to the negotiating table. Instead, it instantly installed a deeply entrenched 56-year-old hardline successor backed by the IRGC.
Right.
It resulted in a fierce, asymmetric retaliation that completely shocked the Pentagon, burning through billions in munitions and resulting in a tragic, mounting loss of civilian life.
Yeah.
It has managed to systematically choke off 20% of the world's seaborne oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz, sending massive shockwaves through the global economy.
And completely halting just-in-time shipping.
Exactly. And finally, it has created a ticking political time bomb for the administration right ahead of the November midterm elections, leaving them desperately searching for a viable exit strategy while sending wildly mixed signals to the public.
It is perhaps the starkest modern reminder we have of the immense friction between the sterile theory of war and the messy, interconnected reality of actually executing it.
Well said. And as a final quick reminder to you, our listener, all the facts, quotes, statistics, and viewpoints we discussed today were drawn strictly from the provided source material, which is the KULT summary of the March 10th, 2026 New York Times investigation.
Yes.
We brought this to you purely to help you understand the mechanics and dynamics of this ongoing situation exactly as it is being reported, without taking any political sides or endorsing any figures involved.
Based on what we've unpacked today, it makes you wonder about the future of modern warfare. Is it even possible anymore for a superpower to isolate a targeted military victory? Or has the globalized economy essentially become an inescapable human shield?